Okay, so today we're going to be changing the brakes. This is a 2018 Chevy Silverado 3500 series. And let's jump into it. We're going to do the front rotor and pads. First thing you're going to come across is, well, obviously you want to jack the vehicle up securely. But these here are going to be 7/8. This is just a plastic cover. And you want to put a socket on here. And these will typically come off fairly easy. So get your 7/8 socket, take all those off, which I did. That comes off. Now, I already started taking some of these lugs off for speeding up the video. You're going to use your same 7/8 socket, and you can go ahead and take all the lug nuts off of your rim here. A lot of times this rim is going to be really hard to get off. It's going to be stuck on there. I never like to recommend telling anybody to get under the vehicle and bang from underneath. So what I had done was soak this with PB Blaster for a good hour before I decided to work on it. You got to get inside in here, and when that plastic cover's on before we took it off, try to squirt some behind it so that it all drips down in here. Basically so everything can get freed up before you start the job. But what I did with this one, it was stuck on there a little bit. I just sat down and I kind of just kept kicking it on each side of the rim, and eventually it just shook loose. Alright, these can be a little tough to get off, so we'll slide our tire off now. Next, what you want to do is, you're going to see these nuts in here, and there's, you might be figuring out how do you get to them, but what you're going to need is you definitely can't fit a deep dish socket in here. So I got a 13/16 here, and I can fit that in there. Now if you look around, there's a hole for each one, and basically that is so you can take your extension there and slide your extension through there like that. And now you can go ahead and either get your ratchet drive on there or your impact gun. Some of these you might find that they're really, really tight. I got them all loose now, but I'm going to show you how I did it. The impact was actually even struggling trying to take these off. One or two methods. You can get a torch and heat up the nut itself. Don't heat up the actual threads because you want to expand. You don't want to expand the threads. You want to expand the nut to loosen it to get it off. But the easiest way I found was when you're trying to turn these, the wheel's going to want to turn because it's up in the air. So what I did was I just got a bar and set it right in between these right here. I had a rag around, I don't know where I put it, but I wrapped a rag around here so I didn't mess up the threads. Put the socket on there, put my extension through there, put the ratchet on. Alright, now when I put downward pressure, this bar will keep the hub from spinning. And then I got myself a long leverage bar and basically just cranked down on it, and it broke them free. What happens is you lose a lot of torque on an impact when you use an extension. You're losing that extra torque rather than going right from the gun to the actual socket itself. When you add an extension in, you lose torque. So the gun was struggling to get these nuts off, so I had to do it this way and use the breaker bar to break them free. Now once you have all those nuts out, you can pretty much just pull this right off there, just like that. Alright, so in the back here, you're going to have a 13/16 bolt, which I had loosened up already, just for the sake of speeding up the video. The bottom one down here was actually really tight. I couldn't get it off with the impact. I even put a ratchet drive on there with a leverage bar. What I ended up doing was heating this up right here, this metal, for a good 3 or 4 minutes with a little propane torch, and expanded this metal a little bit, and then this came right off with the impact. Alright, so now that these two are loose, I can pull them out. But what you want to do now, that's going to free up this whole assembly. Be careful that this doesn't collapse down, because this brake line, you're going to jeopardize breaking that. Alright, so what you want to do is be prepared to lift this and maybe set it up here. Get yourself a bungee cord or some type of a strap that you can keep that up there, because if that falls down, you're going to break this brake line, possibly hurt yourself if you're underneath it. Or the bolt's out. Now I put a 5-gallon pail here. I'm going to lift this off and just set it right on top of here. All right, I got the caliper out of the way, sitting up there on the bucket. Now we can go ahead and just pull this rotor off. Just like that. Slide our new rotor up there. Just like that. Now you can move up to your caliper. So you can take this pad out. The one that's on this side, you want to leave that in, because we are going to put a clamp on here and compress that. But you can take this pad out on this side for now. All right, and there's these little metal clips that are in here. That's pretty much where your brake slides in on each side. You want to make sure that you have room in here for your brake to slide in. If you don't, just put your hand here and grab this frame and pull it towards you, because this thing actually pivots. I don't know if I can do this with one hand, but this frame actually slides back and forth on these bolts right here. So if you don't have enough room for your pad to slide in, then put a hand here and squeeze, and it should slide this frame all the way in to give you room to slide your pads in. These brackets we're going to take out. Okay, I've seen guys leave them in and just grease them up and put new pads in, but they come with clips and they're real easy to do, and since you went through all this to take it off, you might as well just replace these. If you look over here, there's a little tab that's holding them on. Get yourself a screwdriver, push down on that tab, and kind of pull with your other hand and kind of shake that thing out of there. Here's the bag of tabs that came with it. And just pull one out at a time, because these are going to be a little bit different each tab. And kind of match it up, make sure you got the right tab. Alright, there's our old one, here's our new one. And typically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some grease right in here, because that's where our pad is going to be resting in there. And anywhere you have metal touching metal, you want to prevent that annoying squeaking noise when you put new brakes on. And I'm going to put grease on the back side of it. So put grease on the inner side, and then put a little bit of grease on the back side. And then we'll go ahead and we'll slide that tab back in this side, and then we'll do the same thing for that side. Now the trick to getting those tabs in, make sure when you're replacing it, again, you have the right tab, and that you have this thing on this side where you push down with the screwdriver. Alright? But the key to getting these in is you got to kind of angle it like that to get this tab to come up into there. Alright? And then you're going to have to, again, I apologize, it's hard to do it one hand. But go in on an angle with it. I fought with it for about a minute. And I don't really want to keep stressing on this part of it in case somebody's trying to get to another part of this video, but I have to, because these little things are things that are important that can make somebody really mess up their brake job if they're not done right or whatever. So I mentioned putting it in on an angle and up, all right, but also you can bend this in a little bit. Okay, this whole squared off section here, bend it in, because it might not be fitting in your track properly. So bend that in, and as you're putting this in on an angle, take your other hand up front here and push, and take another hand and push on the bottom. But it does take a little bit of finesse to get it in there, but they will go in. Now we're going to go over, we left this pad in, remember? And this is where your calipers actually compress out. So what we need to do is put a clamp on here. And because these are in the outward position, when we put our new pads in here, the new pads are going to be thicker, and it's not going to fit over top of the rotor. So we're going to get a clamp, and we're going to squeeze these calipers. We're going to compress them in. And you want to leave this pad on to protect the caliper, so we're not damaging it as we're squeezing it in. Okay, so you want to go, right now is loosen your master cylinder cap. Now, you don't have to take it all the way off, but I just crack it loose, all right, and I just kind of, there we go, I just kind of rest it on top. All right, what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to pull this rotor off right now, so it gives me some room to get my clamp in there. I probably should have put this on later, so I'm going to pull this back off, and then we'll put our clamp on our brake here, because remember, we can only move this thing around so much because of the brake line holding it in place. So we're gonna have to get this out of the way, this rotor. You can see we got our clamp on here. Just got one end on here, and the other amp is resting on the brake pad over there. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna turn this in, and that's basically going to squeeze that caliper shut. So you want to do a couple turns on this side, just pull this in, and then we need to loosen this, put it on this side, and squeeze this side in. So I want to show you on this new caliper here. You see how these are pushed all the way in here? Okay, they're almost flush with the casing here. All right, what we just did was the other ones were like up here, and we had to push them down. Okay. I had one guy who had emailed me saying that he was, doing the putting the C-clamp on there, and they weren't compressing. The C-clamp was getting really hard to turn. And what happened was his pad. Now your pad, remember, you're using your pad. If your pad is not seated in those tracks, and let's say when you took this caliper off, if your pad popped out and it's sitting down here, well, then all you're doing is compressing the pad against this case. And the pad, you have to make sure your pad is sitting against the caliper here, all right? Because you need to push these in, and if it's not in this groove, the pad can't slide in to push those in. Is that making any sense? Compress these two in, so I can go ahead and remove the old pad now. And you can see these are now pushed in and flush against there. I'm going to get an air hose right now, and I'm going to kind of blow all this out, just because there's brake dust and stuff in here, and being that we're not replacing the caliper, the least you can do is spray some brake clean on here or something and hit it with some high pressured air to at least clean out any debris. And of course we got to take these clips out here, same ones we did on this side, and do the same thing. To get this pad in the tracks, this is a process here. If you don't have the frame lifted up here and this top bolt still in. So what you can do this one or two ways. You can put this whole assembly back on and just put your top bolt back in. Loosen your two hex heads here. They're 10 millimeter. And lift the frame up and just remove this part of it and put your pads in, and then you lower the frame down on the rotor. I know it's probably kind of confusing right now, but anyway, I'm at this point already. So to get the pad in right here without doing all that, you have to get it completely level with these tracks right here, these pins you put in. If you have the pad on any sort of angle, it's going to be very hard to get it in. So you want to get it just to the edge of the tracks so that it's barely resting on there. You have to have this side right to the edge and this side right to the edge to get that to slide in. And there, push it up in there like that. Now that that's in there, I'm going to turn this caliper so that it's almost laying on its back, so this isn't tempted to slide out again. And now we're going to do the same thing to this side over here. So I got the other pad in as well. It's a little bit frustrating, but line it up with your track over here. And the secret to doing it this way is, if you get a screwdriver from this side, because your bracket is going downwards and is preventing the pad from sliding in on that channel, you can get a screwdriver on this side and pry up on that little tab there. All right, and that'll allow the pad to slide down. But it's going to take some finagling, holding it with your hand in place. And up here, same thing with the top. Put your screwdriver in there and pull up on the tab as you push with your pad to get it to go down in the track. And again, can't stress enough, you almost have to have that pad completely straight. You can't do it on an angle. So now what you want to do is carefully, so you don't have these pads fall out now, is we're going to flip this caliper back over. Well, actually, we're going to put the rotor on, and then we're going to flip the caliper back over and rest it on top of that rotor. Now that I have the rotor back up there, you can see it's kind of wobbly on there, which is going to give me a problem trying to get that caliper to drop on there straight. So what I'll do is I'll take two nuts, I'll put one down here, and I'm going to put one up here. And I'm actually going to, you don't have to put them all the way on, but just to hold this rotor straight up and down so we can get that caliper and put it back on there. We got our two bolts on there, that's straight. everything lined up. And there we go. All right, our caliper slid on there rather nicely. Now, if you remember earlier, the top bolt and the bottom bolt we took out, we can go ahead and we can put those back in now. We can put this back on, which pretty much you just line it up there, like so. And those nuts that we took off of there, we'll just put them on by hand, the ones on the inside. Remember, we had to stick the extension through these holes. Well, we'll put all them on by hand, and then we'll go ahead around with the impact and just retighten them up the same way that we took them off. I got all them all tightened up with the impact here. Now, this is the only thing that holds the wheel on, these bolts. These bolts come loose, the whole wheel comes off. So what I would do, especially since I mentioned earlier, you lose a lot of torque when you're connecting an extension to your impact gun. So you never want to trust how tight you got it. You don't want to be driving down the road wondering, I wonder if that tightened them all the way. Because you're going to hurt yourself, kill yourself or somebody else. So go around with an actual ratchet drive, and if you have to, put a little tensioner bar on there so you can get that extra oomph out of it. We'll call it an oomph. And make sure they're all tight. Everything back together now. Before you go ahead and put your wheel on, just make sure everything is tight. Remember, these are your brakes. This controls how you stop and how fast you stop and if you stop. All right, we're gonna go ahead and put the master cylinder cap. We're gonna tighten that up, and we're gonna go ahead and start the truck, and we're gonna pump the brakes, because remember, these are compressed all the way in, and what we want to do is pump the brakes and close those pads in on this rotor. All right, we want to make sure that that's all functioning properly before we go put the wheel on, because we don't want to have to rip the wheel back off. So let's go ahead and tighten our cap back up. Now, when you first step on the brakes, they're gonna feel a little bit spongy. They may go down to the floor. They shouldn't really go all the way to the floor, unless you replace the caliper and you pulled that brake line off and let some air in the system. But for the most part, it should just be about maybe 5 or 6 pumps, and you should feel that tighten up again. The brakes feel good. At this point now, you can go ahead and throw your rim back on and your plastic cover, and that's it. That's a wrap. Just, of course, always check your brake fluid. Don't forget to tighten that cap up, and take it out for a test drive. I wouldn't go jumping on the highway in traffic at first, but drive, if you have a big parking lot, drive around the parking lot, or take it in some back roads or something, and just make sure everything is good and legit, and nobody's going to get hurt from something you may have forgot to do when you were doing the brakes. But if you can, please hit subscribe below and give me a like. I do these videos pretty much daily, just so I can get the subscribers and the likes, and try to make a living off of it. And that's why I do them, try to help people out. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. It's whattodorob@gmail.com, and I'll see you guys next time.